on how do we translate all that into developing programs and partnerships on around improving women's human rights in Mindanao. So today we will focus on really on addressing the issues that we discussed yesterday, but not just addressing in general way, but in very concrete programmatic ways. We will begin with a presentation on UN Women's programmatic response. This will be a discussion on the regional. When we say regional, it's Southeast Asia, no, not subnational level, the regional program that UN Women has developed. So we are very privileged to have with us our mama, Trish and my mama in UN Women yesterday. To moderate the session, and also very privileged to have with us the regional program manager to make the presentation. So let's really focus on it and look at it listen to it very closely, because that will provide us a framework. We're not saying that's the best framework, but a framework for how we might do things and develop partnerships here in Mindanao. So with that, I turn over the floor to Sok.
Hey, that's a great title, Mama. That's not even in your. There's not even in the CV. Yeah, I love that. You know, at the end of the day, it is the kind of mama that you are that counts, no? It is not how great a chief or how great a, you know. So thank you. I will now add that to my title. I will be moderating this very important session on improving women's human rights in Southeast Asia, an overview of UN Women's regional program. And it is, of course, something that is, thank you. Maybe I sound better here. And I said it's a program that's very close to my heart because it's really started way back. And we're very privileged to have our regional program manager for the CEDAW-CIP, and her experience actually goes beyond CEDAW-CIP and even goes beyond UN Women. Because before she joined us, she was, I don't know if you're familiar with the Committee on Asian Women, which is really working on women's workers' rights. So DIPA has long been advocating for the women's cause. And even before that, you have heard of Action Aid, no? And she was also very much a part of Action Aid. So DIPA has been a long time advocate for women's rights. And even before that, she's been working with the rural women of India. So she does bring to UN Women not only her technical and substantive expertise, but also her actual work in the field. So we're very lucky to have her, and I'm quite pleased that I was the one who hired her in UN Women, and I'm even much more pleased that she stayed on, you know? And so she has seen quite a lot that has changed in UN Women. Okay, so with that, I'd like to bring in Deepa Bharati. Thank you.
Thank you, Sok. And I'm certainly glad I joined UN Women, UNIFEM at that time. UNIFEM. Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. But yes, I've been in the region for quite some time, and for the last 5 years I've been with UNIFEM, UN Women. I joined the CEDAW-CIP team in June, and I have in the room people who have been working with the program for much longer than I have. So when there are questions, I would be directing it to my colleagues, including, I'm sure Sok can respond to some of those from a long time back, because she was quite involved. My presentation, I actually have 2 presentations, and I would like to not go over all the details because it is a long presentation, and one which will be made available to all of you. So we don't need to go, and I don't need to read each of the outcomes and outputs. A little bit of the context, as I had mentioned yesterday as well, given the situation of women and girls in the Southeast Asia region, in response to the situation, UN Women developed a regional program it was called CEDAW Phase 1, which was really about introduction of CEDAW to not just to people who were not gender equality advocates, but even with National Women's Machinery and gender equality advocates, explaining the substantive principles of CEDAW and to includes its implementation in various laws, policies, programs, and plans. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, the Phase 2 started in 2011. Phase 1 was also funded by the Government of Canada, and Phase 2 is also funded by the Government of Canada. Phase 2 is about deepening the work. It's about building on the knowledge, awareness, capacity developments we had done. It is to work particularly with the legislative, the parliamentarians, and to deepen our work, to go more subnational level work, not just at the national level. And especially in countries where we have decentralization, this is quite crucial. So in this light, what does CEDAW Phase 2, which is the whole title is the Regional Program on Improving Women's Human Rights in Southeast Asia. What does it do? This is a regional program and it covers the 8 countries. It's funded by Canada, and this is the time. Now, of course, the background is that all the Southeast Asian countries have ratified CEDAW. They have this obligation. The implementation is lagging. We work as UN Women. Always the support is, as a UN agency, we work with the governments. But as an organization which came from the women's movement, which has had a very strong connection with the women's movements, the other aspect of all our work is supporting civil society, women's movement, and to support building movements and organizing. Phase 2 also aims to strengthen regional networks and mechanisms. I will be talking about another associated project, which also we manage from the same team works and manages, which is on ASEAN, and I will be making a separate presentation. But both the programs have the same goal of improving women's human rights in Southeast Asia. And there are different strategies and how we do it. So the 2 programs provide different strategies. What we were able to achieve in Phase 1, legal reforms, reviews, understanding of CEDAW and the use of CEDAW. So we've supported quite a few shadow reports, development of new laws, reform of laws. The more examples can be given by my colleagues from the 6 countries who are here. Our colleague from Indonesia will be joining fairly soon as well. And higher commitment by the government to CEDAW implementation. So even as of a week and a half back, we had our Cambodian delegation, which was headed by the Minister of Women's Affairs, present in front of the CEDAW committee, and the team in Cambodia has been working in terms of mock sessions and in supporting the government in understanding CEDAW principles. And it's not just about CEDAW, how the country has been implementing some of the concluding observations. So this is, I'm simplifying and generalizing it, but of course a lot is involved in the implementation of CEDAW commitments. Well, Phase 2 was designed because there was still, at the end of Phase 1, the situation was that there is need to enhance awareness. It's really to work with other line ministries. And as yesterday again was said, I think literally every meeting I'm in, this comes up, that National Women's Machineries are not very well funded, and they have very limited mandates in many countries. And if you want to make, for gender mainstreaming or for improving women's human rights in various aspects across various identities, whether in the workplace, in the public sphere, in the private sphere, if you want to address economic empowerment, if if you want to address violence, there's need to work with different stakeholders who may not all be gender equality advocates. So there is still a need to do more in terms of capacity awareness, to work with individuals as well as collective. One of our challenges, I think, as UN, as exists in other development world, is how much capacity development and where do we leave behind sustainable institutional capacity change? Is it capability development or is it a institutional capacity development? Well, we go towards an institutional capacity development, but in the process, I think it's really opportunities like this where we hear from others how much more needs to be done and are we on the right track. So the capacity development has been also along the practical application of CEDAW along with the substantive meaning and principles of CEDAW. And we continue to work with NGO networks, with newer groups of women. We as UN Women, as well as in the CEDAW program, have a specific mandate to work with disadvantaged and marginalized groups of women. And which means we have been working increasingly with various groups of women, say whether it be trafficked persons, migrant women, rural women, indigenous women. We've done a little bit of work with women with disabilities, HIV positive women, and others. Well, I'm not going to read this, but these are the outcomes. It's enhanced regional processes which facilitate CEDAW implementation, improvement in women's human rights. And to do this, we need increased skills and knowledge in CEDAW compliance, in monitoring, awareness of formal and informal justice systems. As I said, this is a key focus of phase 2 of the program. And monitoring and enhancing accountability mechanisms. This is again another key element of this phase in which we are looking at how do we enhance accountability mechanisms, support NGOs, women's groups, women's movements in holding governments accountable for CEDAW and for women's human rights. Now, these are some of the things we do. We do trainings, we do workshops, capacity development, sharing of good practices, knowledges, and for towards each of these results areas of increased awareness. Well, for our RBM gurus, of course, this language is not completely RBM compliant, but I hope you will allow me with the limitations of PowerPoint to say that this is the second goal area, and again we do all these activities towards reaching these outcomes. We have knowledge products, as one of our colleagues was showing, the DV law report. We first produced many of these reports in English and they are further translated. A couple of weeks back, the domestic violence law publication was translated and launched in Laos. It's being right now translated into Burmese and at the request of the government in Myanmar. And so we've been working with civil society. And one point I must mention is it's not just CEDAW. The CEDAW team also works when there are other reporting to other treaty bodies, for example, in the UPR processes. We have been organizing meetings with UNICEF in looking at the commonalities in the concluding observations of CEDAW and CRC, because particularly when our mandate covers girls, and so that's a mandate which is overlapping between UN Women and UNICEF within the UN system. We do focus on South-South exchange and cooperation. Sometimes it's, for example, in the regional human rights mechanisms, it would be with, say, Latin America or Africa region. But one of the things which we would like to systematically do is within our UN offices to learn a little bit from what our South Asia office is doing, what Pacific is doing, what are their initiatives with their partners, stakeholders. There is certainly a lot of experiences our colleagues, say from Pakistan, have, we can see from some of the exchanges. So to do it a bit more systematically, it's not like it doesn't happen. Network institutional building, I'll be talking in the context of the ASEAN project, how we've supported women's groups and social movements here in the formation of a women's caucus. We do knowledge products, which is basically publications, reports, research, information. And through our technical support, through our national offices, we support national implementation of CEDAW. So these are our activities like any others. Our key partners have been National Women's Machineries, Key Line Ministries. We have engagement with Ministry of Planning. One of the things, we have a program in UN Women, well, it's not really a program. We have an advisor for gender responsive budgeting. And what we are trying to do is to include gender responsive budgeting, so the budget processes and evaluation of the budget processes, or using budget allocation and use as one way of monitoring CEDAW implementation or compliance on how much is spent on women's programs and in improving gender equality and women's human rights. So working with planning, in some instances we've been working with ministries of statistics, so sex disaggregated data. We have a program in all our countries working on women's economic empowerment, where we work with ministries of, again, labor, planning. So it's really reaching internally cross-fertilization within UN Women's partnerships on working with other line ministries. We work with civil society organizations, as I've said, both national as well as regional, and these could be women's groups, women's movement, indigenous women's groups, groups working, positive women's groups, and others. And National Human Rights Institution. We have a particular project right now, a multi-year project in strengthening the national human rights institutions in the Southeast Asia region in the 5 countries. And in both in implementation of CEDAW, in their monitoring of the human rights situations within their mandates. And there are other networks outside UN which are working on strengthening national human rights globally as well as in Asia Pacific region. So it's really to see how we can also go beyond our region and learn through other partners. And as I said, phase 1, it's not just at national level, but also at subnational levels. So I'll be talking a little bit more about our partnership in the ASEAN project, but these are largely the other partners within the ASEAN mechanisms which are relevant in this region. And within the UN system, we work with a few other agencies, with UNSCAP, which is the headquarters of UN in Asia Pacific region. It is the Economic and Social Commission of Asia, of the UN in Asia Pacific. UN Women co-chairs working group on gender equality and women's empowerment, which is chaired by our regional director along with the head of the Social Development Division in SCAP. So within the UN system, as someone had asked yesterday, what are we doing to hold the other UN agencies accountable? This working group is one mechanism where we are collaborating with other UN agencies, and this is especially at the regional level, because SCAP is in Bangkok in the regional office. So that's the work at the regional level. In the country level, our colleagues are working with the UN country teams. In many of the countries, if not all, we are co-chairing the gender theme groups, which are within the UN system, the working groups which work on gender equality and women's human rights. We have specific work with UNDP, which has been working on access to justice, so we partner and collaborate with Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, with UNICEF, which works on child rights, and we collaborate and where possible have CEDAW committee members interact, come, provide comments and provide technical support. We recently had a meeting of the ASEAN where we had CEDAW committee members, and that was really very, very good because it had all the ACWC, ASEAN Commission on Women and Children, their representatives in the region. So these are some of our activities and partnerships. Now I will very quickly make my second presentation, which is on the other project which our program team manages. It is again in all our countries except Timor-Leste, which is not part of the ASEAN. So this is a project which is on supporting the regional mechanism, supporting especially the AICHA, which is the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, and the ASEAN Commission on Women and Children, ACWC. in improving women's human rights in Southeast Asia. This project started 2010 and it is still ongoing, so it is still phase 1. This is the first time, I believe, in the Asia Pacific Regional Office we have a specific program which supports an intergovernmental body. In South Asia, we do work with the SAARC, which is their intergovernmental body, and from the Pacific, in the Pacific Island Forum. But we have developed within the Southeast Asia region a program which has systematic multi-year support to the ASEAN in its human rights mechanisms. Now, again, the reason was that ASEAN countries have ratified CEDAW. This was really using the mandate which UN Women had. And in fact, UN Women came about in 2011, and this project goes back to 2010. So I think people who developed this project were quite visionary in actually putting ourselves into the space of working with intergovernmental bodies such as the ASEAN, which I think today is extremely crucial as we see, because it's a very specific mandate of UN Women to work with intergovernmental bodies. The reasons, of course, were we were working with different political regimes, backgrounds, there were these concerns. The ASEAN project complements the CEDAW project. So we are addressing very similar issues, which is about violence against women, violation of women's human rights. The developments, as all of us know, in the ASEAN region are that the ASEAN is becoming a strong factor in how countries are perhaps making certain decisions, or how the regional mechanisms are playing a part in what political mobility happens in a certain direction in women's human rights. But these contexts which were there, which are there for the CEDAW context, low political participation, violence against women, violation of rights, culture and tradition, and social norms being an excuse for reservations or reasons for reservations in certain articles of CEDAW, as well as lack of implementation on certain principles. So those contexts still existed. These are the ASEAN commitments. So also, along with these problems, there was also opportunities. The ASEAN itself had committed to the Vientiane Action Plan, which had talked about the establishment of a body to work on women and children, the ASEAN Commission. And then, of course, the ASEAN Charter, which further emphasized, first of all, ASEAN Charter clearly said that there should be an intergovernmental, the human rights body, which was there in its Article 14. And then subsequently in 2009, the ICHR was formed. In 2010, the ACWC was formed. So there were these commitments. These are not because of UN Women. These were already the opportunities which UN Women had on the ground. So also UNIFEM, back in 2006, isn't it, Sok, had a MOU with ASEAN, which was extended, and it still has been extended, and we are now working on a new MOU. The UN system is working on an MOU with ASEAN, and we as UN Women are working on an MOU with ASEAN, which hopefully should be signed or concluded in the coming year. So we had already a framework of cooperation, and we had been working in terms of technical support in various declarations, in different high-level meetings. And as I said, since the CEDAW-CEAP has been working since 2004 in all the ASEAN countries except Brunei, Singapore, and Malaysia, and Myanmar. The other countries we had been working through the CEDAW-CEAP, and as well as UN Women's presence, UNIFEM's presence. We had been supporting also many of these workshops on DV law, gender equality laws, linking violence and HIV. So we had these partnerships to build on. What we have done is supported the ASEAN governments with the development of TOR of ACWC through a joint roundtable of ACW and SO. This is what senior officials for social welfare and development. I can never remember these acronyms. There are just too many of them. And in the working group meetings, the technical, no, I do memorize it. I do try to memorize it every time, but there's just too many. Well, we've been supporting mobilization and advocacy of the women's groups. We, as I said, we still have support to the regional networks of NGOs as well as national NGOs and many of the countries here on advocacy with ICHA, ACWC in terms of their TOR. And now we are at the stage where in 2014 and 15, the TORs are going to be reviewed again. And we have been working with the third human rights mechanism body, which is the ACMW, which is on migrant workers' rights, on the framework instrument for engendering the framework instrument on protection and promotion of rights of migrant workers in the ASEAN. Well, the challenges. Can I ask before that, are we live streaming? Yes? Okay, that's fine. Oh, I think these presentations have been made in many places. But there is, if we look at all of the many of the TORs, as many of you might have looked at, it's more promotion than the protection mandate. I mean, it's really how do we bring in the protection mandate? Where is the protection mandate? And it's not for us as UN Women. These are intergovernmental initiatives. So how can we support and bring in that, strengthen the protection mandate is one of the ongoing challenge within the context of national sovereignty and national issues of non-interference in certain instances. There continues to be this challenge of limited civil society participation, even as recent as last year with the AHRD, the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. Many of the civil societies have raised these concerns quite vocally about the limited participation. And then while the TORs of both ICHA, ACWC clearly say that the expertise, the people who should be appointed as commissioners, as representatives in ACWC should have expertise in the certain area, in the case of ICHA on human rights and in the case of ACWC on child and women's rights. There is an uneven level of expertise in understanding substantive equality, discrimination, and what their mandates are, what are the different obligations vis-a-vis CEDAW and other international human rights instruments. So we've been working on building knowledge on international women's human rights standards, and also on the situation of de facto women's human rights situation in the region. Because while we may think, well, it's all known, but it is not. We have in very many instances been requested to conduct a research to come up with some empirical evidence-based knowledge which can be used for then developing programs or in the responses. And the ongoing challenge, I think we all know, is in terms of the alignment of the mandates of ICHA and ACWC. I would rather not elaborate more on this. I think we all know. And there is the culture of everything is consensus-based, which does delay certain things, which does have an impediment when one is dealing with certain sensitive issues. And so these are some of the challenges within the context of which UN Women is supporting the ASEAN bodies. Now, again, of course, our goal is about enhancing women's human rights, including and improving gender equality. We have been working particularly in this project on the ICHA and ACWC. There are a lot of other projects. We do support the ACMW through our migration project. We do work with ACW. We actually are working with the ASEAN Committee on Women on a project on political participation. It's quite a big project on enhancing women in women's leadership for participation in parliamentary processes. But that's outside this project. So I'm talking about the project which we are doing, but of course UN Women has engagement with other sectoral bodies of the ASEAN. So within this project, we are working with ICHA and ACWC in supporting them to more effectively protect and promote the rights of women in this region. We would like them to adopt programs, activities, dialogue mechanisms. We have been supporting them in the implementation of their work plan. We've been doing exchanges, various meetings, discussions. As I said, we had an exchange with CEDAW committee members so that they could enhance their capacity, understand issues of women's human rights, which needed to be also addressed as they are a regional body. So while they are a specific focal point for their own governments of their own countries, they also as a body are a regional body. So what does it mean to upscale or regionalize? You know, what is their mandate at the regional level? Now this is something which we've been trying to address. And while we are not responsible for a secretariat, to work with the ASEAN Secretariat, which has been supporting AICHA and ACWC. So there is a Department of Women, Children, Labor, Migrant Workers within the ASEAN Secretariat. So we've been working with them when it comes to supporting ACWC on women's human rights, principles and priorities. Now I'm not going to read a lot of this. It's, again, as I said, these are our strategies in building understanding, having dialogues, and including human rights from a very progressive aspect and not have issues of, you know, which are detrimental to women's human rights in declaration. So as much as possible, we are trying to build capacity and understanding. We've been working with women's, UN Women's supported the formation of Women's Caucus. It's called Women's Caucus, which is co-chaired or co-led by two big regional NGOs called APWLD and ERAW, which have been working on women's human rights for a very, very long time now. So they lead the Women's Caucus, which engages in advocacy and lobbying with with these two bodies, especially with the Secretariat of ASEAN. They've also had meetings with the Secretary General of ASEAN. And they engage actively in the different various meetings and processes at different points of development, implementation of plans, activities, of documents, and supporting the institutions, bringing attention. They come up with fact sheets, paper on ASEAN. And we've, for example, supported delegation of ASEAN members, ASEAN Secretariat, to go attend trainings, to have an interaction. A whole delegation of ACWC members went to Geneva to meet the CEDAW committee members. We've had AICHA members have an interaction with in New York. They went to meet various UN agencies and understand how the UN system works, some of the issues, concerns. So these are some of the strategies in improving. We hope that AICHA ACWC will fulfill their mandate towards human rights as set out in CEDAW by improving, fully developing their own competencies, their staff, improving their working methods, the development of a secretariat, and collective capabilities and the institutional processes. We've been doing research, studies. We are in fact supporting right now a very interesting initiative of the ACWC in developing a progress report on gender equality in the ASEAN region. This is being led by the Philippines, by Professor Aurora de Dios. As we know, she's the ACWC Commissioner on Women's Rights. So she's leading this very interesting initiative in the ASEAN. It's just started this year, and they're hoping to launch it in 2015. We've been supporting AICHA in some of their, in conceptualizing, thinking of their thematic study on business, human rights, migration. And we've been doing fact sheets, papers, small briefers for them, and also supporting in their own development of their knowledge products. Facilitating dialogues. We recently had in June a dialogue between with the AICHA, ACWC, ACMW, National Human Rights Institution, civil society organizations on the human rights mechanisms in ASEAN, and looking at how, where are the challenges and where are the opportunities. So even a dialogue like that was quite useful in bringing up some of the issues of alignment, DOR review. I think I've said all of this. SAPA is another network which was formed by Forum Asia, another regional human rights NGO based in Bangkok. So SAPA is another network which has been following up on the human rights mechanism development in ASEAN. So these are our partners and stakeholders we've been working with. I've mentioned already, particularly now with the ASEAN project, we do also work with ministries of foreign affairs, because the ICHA reports to the ministers of foreign affairs. And so this is another new partnership which we have been developing. The search project of CEDAW is a very old project. It's closed already, but in the beginning, in 2010-11, we were quite actively engaged with this project in the ASEAN advocacy. We continue to work. One of the latest things is the ASEAN ACWC has the Declaration on Violence Against Women, which is drafted by ACWC, has just been adopted. And so there are discussions about the declaration itself. Have you all had a chance to see the declaration? Okay, if you'd like, I have a copy. So that's very much what we have been doing in the region, in Southeast Asia. I've breezed through it, and there is a lot more to it, and we would be happy to answer questions. And as I said, I would not be the only one answering. My colleagues here would also add from their perspective. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Deepa. That was a very substantive presentation, and I'm sure that stirred a lot of questions in your mind. I remember very well when CEDA was evaluating the program, the first phase, the question always was, so what is the added value to the region? Because and so I'm very glad that now it looks like the second phase of the program is paying more attention to the regional level. Because at that point, what they were saying is, well, this is a regional program. It doesn't mean that it's just that the sum of the individual national CEDAW programs, because I think the intention was really, well, at the regional level. So what was the added value? So I'm very glad that now you are paying more attention to regional efforts. Are there questions? We have until 10 o'clock, no, Jeannie? Questions, please. Comments, compliments, criticisms, anything. Anything goes. Can you identify yourself? And we know, of course, you're Digna, but...
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Digna Perote, representing Luna Legal Resource Center for Women and Children based in Davao City. For Ms. Deepa, good morning.
We'll get about 3 questions, and then we'll ask Deepa to respond, okay?
Ms. Deepa, some of the attending organizations here are also members of the PhilWomen Mindanao. PhilWomen is a national network composed of 300 member organizations based in the Philippines, no? And 4 months ago, the ASEAN had released its draft BAUSI declaration, and can we hear from you what are those in the BAUSI draft declaration that something like coined in your program, regional program of the UN Women? Programs in the BAUSI.
Oh, okay.
What are in the
Can
BAUSI
we
declaration?
request the live streaming be dead? Only for the meantime. I was about to say, can we kill it? But, we are women of peace, So...
greater sensitivity. One of I just collected my data on a research I was trying to do, and this is how to teach biochemistry using human rights framework. And the result is a little bit dismal, initial. That's why I'm asking if there are also parallel work in that
and for all your comments. And now we're gonna pause for a break. Actually, I'm just practicing how to be a media. No. Actually, thank you so much. Now, get your coffee and then come back here, please. Thank you so much.